we're now at the stage where both ourselves and our enemy are on even footing. We've both got a weapon, we both can attack, but neither of us can actually cause damage to each other or take damage. So let's change that. Let's make it so that our character and our lightsaber can cause damage to this droid. So to do that, I'm going to go to my content, back to my game mode, and let's open up the Jedi class. Let's go to the viewport, and the first thing we're going to need to do, we're going to actually need to create a hitbox around the lightsaber itself, around the blade of the lightsaber. So currently my blade is inactive, so let's have a little look where the saber is. Let's have a look. Saber, let's make it visible. There it is, there's my saber. So I'd like a collision box which is big enough to go around this, as well as a little bit more. So I'm going to click on add component, and I'm going to say box collision. And I'm going to call this hitbox. So it's attached to the saber and everything. There it is. So it's about the same size as the saber itself. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Let's say about that. So in terms of the game itself, we'd like the hitbox to be a little bit bigger, because otherwise it could become quite frustrating when you're trying to swing at something and you're not quite hitting it because the hitbox is a little bit too small. While that is accurate, it can be frustrating from a gameplay point of view. So I'm going to put this around about here. Now because this hitbox is attached to my saber, when this hinge rotates, so does the hitbox, which is perfect. So make sure you've got that hitbox there, and make sure it's attached to your saber. I'm going to actually turn my saber back off now so it doesn't mess up the game. There we go. And this is here. This is ready. It's ready to go. So once that's there, let's go to the event graph. Now simply we're going to check whether or not something is overlapping that lightsaber when the lightsaber is swinging. So if you remember from earlier, we said when the lightsaber is swinging, enable this this variable which is called can deal damage. So if can deal damage is active and something collides or overlaps that hitbox, cause damage to that object which collided with it. So let's do that. I'm also actually, quickly before we start, going to highlight that and comment it because we've got to do that, and it's called swing / attack. There we go. Just keep things nice and neat. It's always a good idea to keep things very neat when you're doing this. Alright, so let's right click our hitbox, add event, and say on component begin overlap. Let's put it over here. I want it over here, so I'm going to move it. Now, if something overlaps that hitbox, the first thing I'm going to do is check what it is as overlapped in. So I'm going to cast to enemy droid BP. That's the name of the droid blueprint I made, and plug other actor into that. Now, if it's the enemy droid that I've hit, perfect. I'm also going to check. Let's do a branch, and this is very important. I'm going to check if I can deal damage. If I can deal damage, brilliant. Pull a strand and apply damage. And the damaged actor is going to be the droid, so I'm going to pull a strand from there and plug it in. The amount of damage. Now, a lightsaber is a very dangerous weapon, and I'd like to say if you hit a droid with a lightsaber, it'll probably destroy it. So let's just do 100 damage. And there we go, it's done. So let's just have a quick look. Let's say print string hit droid, and let's give that a test. Here we go. Lightsaber open. There we go. Hit the droid. You can see at the top left there, when I'm hitting him, hits the droid. So it's registering that the lightsaber is swinging forward and hitting that droid. If I move back, doesn't hit the droid. Go a bit closer, hits the droid. Perfect. So let's comment that. I'm also going to get rid of the print string. Let's comment it out. See? We'll say hit detection. There we go. Now this is working in sync with this variable section we made earlier. So make sure that we can actually can damage before applying the damage there. Now that's all we need to do for this blueprint. We now need to go into the enemy droid blueprint and tell it what to do if it takes damage. So let's minimize that. Let's go back to our blueprints and let's open enemy droid blueprint. So under here, I'm going to right click and I'm going to say event any damage. So in the event any damage is passed on to this droid, like we're doing with the lightsaber, we're sending 100 damage to it. This is what event is called. So in this case, I'm not going to be picky. I'm going to say if any damage hits that droid, if anything hits it at all, I just want that to explode. I want it to basically to die, that the droid to be destroyed. So I'll tell you what, before we do that, let's just make a function for that. So let's do a custom event. And we're going to call that explode, because there'll be different things that can cause this to explode. And to do this, I'd like the droid to explode, literally have an explosion spawn. Now, from the start of the content, there's a bunch of basic explosions, so we'll just use one of those for now. So pull a strand, and we're going to say spawn emitter at location. There it is. Spawn emitter at location. The emitter we want is P_explosion. So you can see I've got a couple of different ones there. I'll show you the basic one first, and then I'll maybe swap it out for one of the ones I've made. So P_explosion, and then we need to choose where we want that to explode. And we want that to explode at the droid body. So pull a strand and get world location and plug it in. So that will now explode at the correct location. Once that's played, we can destroy actor. So let's comment that. Droid explosion. And then we can just call that if we take damage. Explode. There we go. Alright, let's give that a go now. Okay. There you go. So I hit it and the droid exploded. Now what we can also do, let's expand this just a little bit. Before we destroy the actor, let's spawn sound. Spawn sound at location. What sound? Again, the starter content already has an explosion come with it. We just need to use the world location that we used earlier. Let's plug that in. Make it look a little bit neater. There we go. So this time, rather than just explode without any visuals, it should make a sound. Perfect. Nice and simple. Nothing too fancy. Not the highest quality of explosion or sound, but it's there. It's working. So that'll also work with any other effect that you've got in Unreal. So I've got an edited version of something from a different project, which is Bot Explosion. Let's have a look at that. Look at that, much nicer explosion. Rather than all the fire, you get bits of debris coming off it. There you go, a nice explosion. I could change it around, so I know I've got some sparks there. Let's have a look. There you go, that's not too bad either. If I really wanted to, I could do both of them. Bot explosion. Let's have a look how that would look. Let's move these up. We're going to copy and paste that. Plug it in. You don't have to do this. This is just me having a little experiment with it and see how this looks. Just move these up just a little bit. There we go. At the correct location. So let's have the spark and the explosion. Awesome. I'm going to keep that there. Looks really, really nice. There you go. So you hit the droid with your lightsaber, it explodes. Perfect. There you go. So, nice and easy. Simple bit of code. So, all you need to do is have a function for the explosion. My one's a little bit more complicated than it needs to be, but it does work. Let's make this a little bit neater. There we go. So I've got two emitters spawning here. So I've got one spawning the explosion and one spawning sparks. That's fine. You only have to have one if you want. You You don't really have to have any if you don't want them. And then I've got a sound spawning at the location as well. Then it destroys the actor. And if you take damage, it just causes that explosion. Then of course, the damage is passed to it by the Jedi, which adds the damage if the lightsaber is being swung and it overlaps at the same time. So that's perfect. Now that works for any melee weapon. It's the same concept. So if you swing an axe, if you swing a crowbar, if you swing a plank of wood, a baseball bat, if you swing anything in terms of a melee weapon and it hits something, you can apply the damage in this exact way. So if you look here, 100 damage is applied by a lightsaber. Maybe only 30 would be applied by a bat or something like that. And what you can do in your enemy droid, you can say if the damage is, let's say, more than, let's use a branch then. If the damage is more than, let's say, 40, then explode. Now what this will happen is, if the damage passed to it is more than 40, it'll explode. If it's something small like a plank of wood, it won't explode. Or you could potentially have a health system in the variables here, and every time you take damage, deduct that amount of damage off the health of the enemy. That's what most games do. You have health, and you deduct health points off every time you get hit. There's much more complicated ways you do this. In this case, I'm literally saying if you take any damage whatsoever, then explode. But it's up to you to make this as complicated as you want your system to be. If this is, for what I'm thinking here is, this is just a simple low level enemy, so one hit of anything will destroy it. If I was making a boss character, which I may do at the very end of this, maybe I'll make it so it does more damage, or needs to take more damage. Like I said, you can make this as complicated as you want, because at the end of the day, the game you're making is your own vision, and that's the most important part. So, can you make sure that you have got a weapon that can destroy an enemy and do damage when you swing at it? If you haven't got that, if that's not quite working for you at this point, go back through the video before moving on.